Sounds. You're listening, of course, to the Social Impact Show. It's just gone 14 minutes after 10. We do a regular feature here. As you know, it's all about positivity. We're really thinking about how can we make this country that we live in better. We've got nowhere else to go. And about 2 weeks ago, we started this feature with a very smart entrepreneur, journalist, author, thinker. And he wrote a book called How to Fix South Africa, an Owner's Manual. Of course, by now you should know Kanthan Pillay. I think he doesn't sleep at all. I think he's one of those guys that just stay awake. You know, he's got that drip. You know that fluid drip you get at the wellness centers that pumps you full of vitamins and stuff. I think that's what he does every night. Kanthan, how are you doing?
You know, that wellness drip thing
Yes.
is only for people who don't have kids. Okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know
so the
what you
kids
mean.
will keep you going until the small hours of the morning, and you know it's like they're up first thing in the morning, and you've got to be reading them the bedtime stories at night.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the energy boost that you get.
Yeah, I
It's
agree
all
with you.
good. Mhm.
Yeah, it's for single people or for nightclub people.
Uh-huh.
You must have thought about the budget speech this week and that announcement that it would be moved to March the 12th. And I wanted to get your immediate reaction when you heard that. What was happening and what did you think? Was that a good call?
Well, I made a prediction a while back that the first test of the GNU is going to come in terms of the budget speech. Because I said, in as much as the ANC can put down a budget, they will not be able to get the budget passed unless the DA actually agrees with the budget.
Yes.
The alternative, of course, is that they could get MK on board because the ANC and MK have more than 50%. But MK is not going to side with Ramaphosa in any case. So
He's not their guy.
yeah, you know, going back many years now, I said at the time that the ANC drops below 50%, we'll get our country back. And we'll get our country back because they will not be able to pass any legislation unless you have 50% of Parliament agreeing with the stuff. And that's exactly what's come to pass. And I think it's fantastic. And the reason why I think it's fantastic is because I don't think government needs more money. I think that we pay a massive amount of money towards our government. Our government doesn't spend it properly.
Yeah, that's what all the comments I've been watching from all the analysts, the economists, been saying the same thing.
Yeah, so now we're in the situation where I think that this is actually an opportunity for this government of national unity to now say, okay, we're going to go back to the drawing board. Okay, we're not just going to be simply saying that we're going to increase our borrowing and increase our spending, and we're going to be taxing people more. And you consider this, like if you're a person who is spending 15 Rand on food, now you're going to be spending 17 Rand on food.
That's crazy, right?
What?
And what was your thoughts when you heard that the speech was leaked, and in the speech was the 17% to and it, what it will add is like
no,
50
look, you see
what,
here-
50 billion
yeah,
rand.
Look, the thing about the speech being leaked, you know, here's the way in which the parliamentary process for the budget speech works. You apply for accreditation as a journalist, and you get onto that shortlist.
And it's embargoed.
And it's embargoed, but then you get put into a lockup at Parliament until the speech is delivered. So they've given you the speech in advance so that you can then go through it
Yeah.
and follow along as the
like
minister delivers.
all of us do as when we
So
cover
the
stories.
situation that we had now is because it got postponed. All of those journalists have it in their heads. So they had to hand back their speeches and leave. But obviously the journalists went out and put the story out. Because that's what they expected to do, right? So, yeah, I don't have an issue in terms of the leak. I don't
So you think it's more sensationalist? It makes the
No, I
story
mean,
sound great.
The leak doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, what does matter is that, I mean, eventually the stuff that's in the budget speech gets into the public domain anyway.
Yeah.
So the fact that in this particular case, the journalists ended up saying, okay, you know, this is not going to be in the budget now, but this is what we saw. That's okay. I don't have a problem with that.
The idea of adding 2% on top of the tax in the current economy essentially means that it's actually going to hurt poorer people in the long run. right? More so than those that have decided to go to other places, put their money offshore, all of that kind of stuff. I've heard arguments for why it makes sense that we should add a 2%, and I've heard arguments on why it shouldn't, and how it would hurt the country, would overburden the country, and that the biggest problem that money is actually meant to deal with is government's wage bill. And that 2% is really going to deal with that 300, I think it's 300.
It's the public sector wage bill, exactly.
That in actual fact, that 2% has to deal with that issues. Your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that, very simply, is that you just simply need to have a wage freeze for the public sector. And it's as simple as that, because the rest of us who are working, we're working in the private sector or we're running our own businesses, and we don't have the luxury of saying that we're not going to be we don't have the luxury of saying we're going to be getting a pay increase this year. Excuse me. I don't know when last you had a pay increase, for example.
20 years ago.
Yeah. So because of the fact you run your own business, I run my own business, a pay increase doesn't feature on the horizon. And you know that what's happened over the course of the past decade, especially, is that the amount of work that has been available has actually been getting smaller.
Yes.
Because the economy has not been performing.
It's shrinking.
Yeah. So how do you have a situation where the economy is growing at less than 1%, but still you want to have the public sector get paid an increase that's over and above inflation?
Guaranteed increases.
Guaranteed increases
year on year.
And this can't be the case. As a country, all of us have to take pain equally.
Yeah.
And I think that if, the government is saying that to the people, that, listen, everyone's going to have to take some pain this year, it would be an entirely different thing. Yeah. But why do parliamentarians always get increases first and foremost?
And it's so interesting what you're saying, Kanthan. I listened to an interview with Davi Ruet where he said that is probably the only industry where people are overpaid and under-deliver.
Yes.
But
there's no consequences.
There's no consequence management,
do their job properly.
None whatsoever. Yeah. But they're guaranteed of increases. Even if the country is bleeding, they're guaranteed of an increase. That is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah. So this is an opportunity, I think, for... so here's an interesting thing to take a view on, okay? The way in which a lot of successful businesses actually work is that they have this idea of zero-based budgeting. Now, just to explain this to our listeners, the way in which this works is that companies for the longest time, they will say, okay, last year we spent 18% on marketing. This year, again, we're going to be spending 18% on marketing plus inflation. The way zero-based budgeting works is that every year you start from scratch. You say, how much money am I going to allocate to marketing? How much money am I going to be allocating to rent? How much, all of those things. They all come together. So instead of having a situation where you're always increasing the amount of money that you're spending, every year you revisit it and you say, right, we're starting from scratch.
Yeah. It could be based on what happened last year. Yeah. Ideally, that's what you want to do.
So as a very good example right now, you could say, last year when we did all of the auditing across the entire country, every municipality, every provincial department, all of that, all of those audits cost us X amount of money. But now this year, because we've got AI assistance, that cost is going to come down. Therefore, the money that we allocate for this auditing should, in fact, be less. It's a very good example.
But that's not how they think, though.
No, but that's the way that we should be thinking. Because that's the way every successful business is meant to be thinking.
You're constantly thinking about streamlining. Yeah. If you can save a penny, you can save a pound. That's the idea, right?
Yeah. So, by the same token, you're buying computers for your staff. Okay, every year computers get upgraded. That doesn't mean that your staff's computers need to be upgraded because the job that they're doing is not changing.
Yeah.
So you buy the lower price model. The prices come down, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But instead, right now you're incentivizing them to spend extra money every year.
I'll put you in the hot seat and I'm going to ask you, what do you think, and I know you think about these things, what do you think is happening now? Because the president, I don't know if you saw the president's speech yesterday after the budget got cancelled. He seemed tired. He felt to me as if there's internal struggles. they tried to push through this budget, and it feels like the GNU stepped in, the other parties in the coalition was almost, I think, held a gun to their head. You go ahead with this, and it's going to damage this relationship. What do you think is happening in that party, in that grouping at the moment? Because this is the first time we've had the budget being cancelled. At the time, this is the 11th hour. Now it's been moved to March the 12th. They have to go back to the drawing board. But if you had to speculate, what do you think is happening?
So the fact that the budget got cancelled, speaks to me to lack of leadership on the part of our president.
Okay.
Because our president should have had all of this sewn up with negotiations ahead of time, and he should have been well aware of the fact that his partners in the GNU were not going to go along with the VAT increase, simply because the people of the country are not going to support any company, any party that is going to push a VAT increase upon people.
No.
It's as simple as that.
Not when we had that 1%, not even, I think the 1% was introduced not even 10 years ago, 6 years ago. Yeah.
Under Cyril,
yeah.
Again,
yeah.
Yeah, so you have to come back to the question of the ANC has now come to realize that they can't just simply push things through Parliament anymore. And there has to be a compromise. And I'm saying at this point, there's an opportunity for the country for the first time to actually reach a compromise that's based on saying we're not going to increase taxes, but we're going to look at taking the budget that we've got, cutting out all of this wasteful expenditure, and spending the money better in terms of how we go forward. And it's a fantastic opportunity. And frankly, if the budgets don't get passed within the next month, that's okay. It means that we're not going to be having this uptick in terms of spending. Ask yourself, what are the priorities that we need to be spending money on right now? And
there are many. And there are many. That's quite interesting, and that's quite a positive take on. This is an opportunity to completely disrupt this process that a lot of people have not been happy with for years.
Yeah.
And it is also an opportunity for the ruling party to really, really think about it.
Look,
and not just
I like
stuff.
the way you're phrasing it, because I'm seeing it exactly the same way. Yeah. So you probably saw that leaked video of the finance minister grumbling about the SARS commission.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so essentially, go out and look for it. But the finance minister...
He's complaining about Kieswetter.
Kieswetter disapproved of this increase in VAT.
Wow.
Okay. Now, this for me is a good sign. And you must understand that the ANC within its structures for the longest time has had a large number of highly competent people. Okay, and I know lots of them myself personally. And the Treasury Department in particular has always been staffed by people who understand the nature of money and who know how to actually take the country forward and grow the economy and so forth. The same thing in the case of our Reserve Bank Governor, Khanyago. Again, he said some crazy things recently about crypto, but be that as it may, I still rate the guy very highly because he actually understands the nature of money and money supply and how we relate to the rest of the world. What we've got now for the first time is an opportunity for those people to have their voices heard, because they've been sidelined by all of the political leadership within the ANC who are only interested in eating.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and I love if we as laymen think about what you're saying in what you're actually, could we have a government very similar to where the head of SARS will say, that's a bad idea. That's never happened before. It didn't happen with Tom Manyani, it didn't happen with any of those guys. But here you've got a leader saying, I disagree. And if you have all of these people standing up, you have better checks and balances. You have better institutions that are representing the actual value and uphold their mandate, and not just be yes boss. Whatever you say goes, boss.
So one of the things that we need to remember is during the Mbeki presidency, when Trevor Manuel was Minister of Finance and Pravin Gordhan was heading up SARS, for every year of the Mbeki presidency, we had decreases in taxes. Every single year.
Wow.
And what happened during that time? The economy of the country was actually flying. Okay, it was the biggest period of economic growth in South Africa's history. Even during the apartheid and colonial era, they had not had
That kind of growth.
That kind of growth in terms of the economy. The problem came during the Zuma presidency, where we started borrowing to pay social grants. And that's impossible to maintain.
Yeah.
You can only afford to give social grants if your country is running at a profit.
And our debt ratio at the moment
No,
is...
that's the reason. Because remember, the first thing that Mbeki did was he told Trevor Manuel, pay off the debt. Okay, so debt at the time was about 20% of our budget. Okay, so you pay off your debt. It's like you're paying for your house and you've paid off your bond.
And our debt is now sitting at what? Above 60%, right?
Yeah, well, that's the debt to GDP ratio, but the amount of money that goes out of the national budget, okay, is what actually matters.
Yeah.
So the thing that Mbeki did is that when that 20% of the budget that was going to pay interest on the debt was taken away, he took that 20% and he put that into social grant. And because of that, there was a stimulus effect on the economy because people now had money in their pockets. They spent it, and so the businesses that benefited then boomed, and the economy as a whole kept growing. And then we got to the Zuma era, and this thing went away. And we need to get back to that time. And remember, all of those people, they're still there to tap their brains. Thabo Mbeki is there. Trevor Manuel is there. Well, obviously, Pravin Gordhan is no longer.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I think we also seem to have, and I think that's brilliant, because in the corporate structure, we talk about that in terms of mentorship. You've got all these leaders that could potentially mentor those leaders that were, as you talked about, under that era when we were thriving. They're still sitting there with that institutional memory. They know how to get it done, but yet, for whatever reason, they've been sidelined or they're no longer interested. Very quickly, in 30 seconds, how do we get back to that era, the era that we had under Thabo Mbeki?
I actually think we're on the path to it right now.
Okay.
And that's why I've been telling people, don't panic about the budget speech being delayed. It's the best thing for the country, because it's forcing people to get a compromise. They're going to have to go through that budget, every single line item, cut wasteful expenditure wherever possible. And I truly believe that you can end up with a situation where you don't have any increase in taxes over the year going forward. And if you do that, it means that people have more money in their pockets to spend. And when people spend money, that boosts the economy. But when you give the money to government to spend, no, that's a drain on the economy.
Yeah, and I think there's nobody better to be sitting around the table than potentially the DA, because they do a very, very good job of that. They have a good understanding.
I'm not so sure about that. You see, to some extent, the DA also believes in this idea of a big state. And, those of us who are in the private sector know well that more often than not, the best service that you get is not from the state. I mean, everyone knows that Postnet is a lot better than the post office, as an example.
It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though those are small, individually run businesses.
Yeah.
And you'd rather take an Uber than take
public transport.
Yeah, than take Metrobus. Yeah, so those are examples. And so the DA is still very much in this idea of having a capable state. I'm not a capable state person.
Okay.
I think you need smaller government, and you need to be empowering more people to be running, sections. So, use the example.
So essentially what Trump is advocating for.
Yeah. So, for example, we don't need Pick It Up that's doing all of the trash collection in the city. You have small, individually owned businesses that get allocated areas.
Yeah.
And let them benefit. They'll run their business more efficiently.
And they can actually employ people in the process. Quickly, as we wrap up, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Hartbeespoort dam issue. It's been an issue for years now, and it's become a terrible eyesore. And it's for whatever reason, we can't get it under control.
So there's a very good book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes.
It's called The Tipping Point. And the story that he talks about is that when you have water lilies, okay, you start off with one water lily, but every day a water lily produces two more water lily, doubles. So one day you have one water lily, the next day you have two, the following day you have four. Now eventually you're going to get to a stage where half of the pond is covered with water lilies. Now how long is it going to take for the pond to be fully covered?
Yeah, it's going to take some time.
No, it's going to take a day.
Oh,
because it doubles every day. You see,
Oh,
so as
okay.
soon as you're getting to the point, so when you see that the Hartebeespoort Dam is getting to the point of half full, you know that you've got literally 2 days before it's completely covered.
Covered.
Yeah, because every plant doubles itself.
wow.
Yeah. So the problem that we've got right now is that the people who are responsible for taking care of this, and eventually it's going to end up being the Department of Water Affairs,
Yeah.
who needs to be responsible for this. You can't allow even a handful of these things. There has to be constant. Remember, these are invasive plants.
Yeah.
They're not native to Africa.
Yeah.
And what has to happen is that you need to have this constant vigilance out there to the point at which you've exterminated every single one by removing it immediately as
Yeah.
it comes out. And you can't poison it. Because,
Yeah. And I think that's what your point is. When you see the first one, act.
Yes.
And when you've gotten rid of the first one, make sure that there's steps to make sure nothing else grows.
Yeah, it's like you have a dripping tap at home, you fix the washer on the tap straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it accrues over time. It
Yeah.
causes damage. And also the idea, and I've heard conversations about it, the local people are upset about it, but nobody's rolling up their sleeves to actually deal with the issue. They've talked about it for years now, and we know it's been a problem for years now.
Well, you actually need to be bringing in excavators on a regular basis to be clearing out these things. And the interesting thing is if you go down to Cape Town, and if you look at the Black River and the Liesbeek River, which both flow through the southern suburbs, for many years those used to be completely overrun. And what has happened since then is that the city government has a regular process of going in there, and they have these earth movers that basically remove all of that invasive vegetation as it comes up. This is an ongoing thing. It's like maintenance on our houses. We always have to be fixing holes in the roof. We always need to be
Constantly.
fixing those dripping taps and all of that kind of stuff.
As
Until they've got that mindset, yeah, we're going to have problems.
Final, and as we always wrap up this conversation, what do we need to think about this week in terms of how to fix South Africa?
I think the biggest thing we need to think about this week is, in the event of a tax increase going through, what are we going to be doing to insulate ourselves from whatever is going to be coming? And, a lot of us, we get to the time of year now where we're going to be getting pay increases.
Yeah.
And my appeal to people is when you get those pay increases, the extra money that you're getting, don't spend it. Put it away into a tax-free savings account, add it to your retirement annuity, and just resist the temptation to spend it. Okay? Rather you cut back on the amount that you're spending, cut back on the amount of times that you're ordering from Uber Eats or Mr. D or any of that.
Or
Okay?
going out or whatever.
Or going out, okay? Just cut back on that stuff, because you need to actually plan in advance, okay? This economy is not going to get better in the short term, okay? I'm hoping by the end of the year we'll have a drastic reduction in the price of petrol, which, if Trump has his way, is going to happen. That's going to be a knock-on effect on economies around the world, and we'll do better at that point. But I'm saying right now, just tighten your belts and resist the temptation to spear. And that's the best way that you can do it. Start with your home.
Okay, we love it. That's Kanthan Pillay, journalist, entrepreneur, author of How to Fix South Africa, an owner's manual, talking to us. This is a weekly feature. We get to learn so much. As you can hear, lots of depth in terms of just thinking about how to solve basic problems. Okay, when we come back, we'll have a chat to JP Kater. He's a well-known rugby journalist, and he's created a new show with Springbok Ashwin Willemse. So we'll unpack what the show is, and they go around South Africa unearthing new rugby talent.